Okay, well, welcome everybody to today's solidarity meeting for the Go North West bus strike, the Queen's Road garage in Manchester on indefinite strike. My name, as you can probably see from the screen, is Ian Allinson. I'm part of the Manchester Trades Council Exec Committee, so I'm standing in today for John Morgan, our president, who can't be here. The strike we're here to support is incredibly important. It's over fire and rehire, one of the issues that's affecting so many workers in so many industries at the moment. But it's also important because it's going to make a difference to whether there's a race to the bottom for the whole transport industry, to the future of public transport in Greater Manchester in particular, where that's very much in the news at the moment. And it's important because it's an indefinite strike, something that is quite rare. I think it's over 10 years since we last had one in Manchester, where workers stay out until they win. Finally, it's important because this is action that's going to make a difference to public health. One of the issues in the fire and rehire is a threat to sick pay. And in the middle of a pandemic, that's particularly disgraceful. And we're seeing the COVID safety rules being ignored by some of the scab operators. We've got an absolutely great lineup of speakers, and we'll have time for questions and discussion after that. But before we get into that, today all around the country, people are remembering Sarah Everard, one of far too many women murdered by a violent man. I'm going to invite you to take part in a moment's silence to remember Sarah, but also to reflect on what we can do individually and collectively to counter male violence against women and the even more pervasive sexual harassment, sexism and dehumanisation of women that enables such horrific crimes. Thank you. It is disgraceful that police have tried to misuse the coronavirus regulations to prevent people holding safe distance, masked outdoor vigils for Sarah, and it's clear that the right to protest is under attack. On Wednesday, Manchester TUC will be hosting a public meeting to discuss state repression against campaigners and trade unionists. The speakers will be Terry Renshaw, who's one of the Shrewsbury 24 pickets framed by the police during the 1972 builders' strike. Karen Reisman, the Manchester nurse, recently fined £10,000 for organising a safe protest over NHS pay, and someone from Police Spies Out of Lives, who campaigned to end the sexual and psychological abuse of campaigners by undercover cops. Our first speaker, really pleased to introduce Pat Gleave, who's the Unite Branch Secretary at the Queen's Road Bus Garage and one of the strikers.
Hi, I'm Pat Gleave. I'm Branch Secretary at Go North West. At the moment, we're undergoing the fire and rehire, which I think most people realise now it's one of the most dreadful things a company can do to its employees. They've devastated the sick pay. They've devastated the scheduling, and to be fair, the scheduling's it people as much as the sick pay. I don't know if you realise, but bus drivers, we have to drive like 2.5 hours to a terminus, 2.5 hours back. Well, the company want to make those circular routes, which means we only get 5 minutes at one end of the route, and it means we can get out of the cab, maybe use toilets, but to be honest, we have to walk the bus because to help with DVT and back troubles. But the company, as I say, they want to make it circular routes, so we don't even get the 5 minutes at a terminus. So I don't know if you can imagine sitting in a cab for 5 hours without getting out of the cab. It's horrendous. Also, they want to cut walking time to the canteen to take a meal break, like in bus stations. But you imagine, he wants to reduce to 30 minutes from 35 minutes for a meal break. So you could end up with a 26-minute meal break by the time you've deducted your walking time. So there's a lot more to it than just basically sick pay. To be fair, we've negotiated tried to negotiate with the company. We've offered over £1 million worth of savings, but it's not enough for the company. They want everything. They're not willing to negotiate. We spent 6 or 7 months trying to negotiate, and they're just not interested in negotiating. At the moment, we're working with ACAS, who's actually forcing them to at least listen to our proposals. But we're still not got anywhere yet. We've had 3 meetings with ACAS, but hopefully ACAS will get them to move a little bit. But the morale's really good on the picket line, even though, as I say, nobody wants to be on strike. And as I say, it was a daunting prospect to take an all-out strike. That you know, in the past we've only done day strikes when we've ever had a strike, but to go all out, you know, on a permanent strike is it's been daunting for everybody. But as I say, morale's still high, and the support's been unbelievable. To be fair, I couldn't believe the support we've had from the NHS, considering all their problems at the moment and the way they're being treated by the government. It was unbelievable to get. We've had monetary support, but we've had moral support off them, and it's been amazing, to be honest. I think some of our problems, as I say, we've got our industry. We have a hell of a lot of back trouble, prostate trouble, bowel trouble. And I think most of that is because our lack of toilet facilities en route. So you can imagine when you devastate the scheduling, the sick rates are going to go high. You know, I mean, they're already complaining that people take too much sick, but it's a job that's high in stress and high in fatigue, which all adds to the sickness rates. But you can see those getting far worse, you know, when they reduce all the scheduling down to what they have done. Plus, weeks are going to get longer. They're going to. There's a lot of unpaid time being added to the routes. We're talking about hours added onto a week. So people spend far less time nowadays than they used to with the families. So you can imagine it if you start adding more and more hours on, especially as the hours are unpaid. That has an impact on the family. So it's, to be honest, it's so much involved with this fire and rehire. I mean, normally when you go into negotiation with the company, when they want conditions off you, you negotiate, and if the conditions are needed, and you give them the conditions, but you work in a way where it has very little or a minimum impact.
To wrap up, please, Pat. Soon.
I will do, yeah. So anyway, I'll just finish with saying we're really, really pleased with the support we've had, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak today.
Well, thanks very much, Pat, and thanks from everybody else as well, because the strike you're undertaking, all of you are fighting for us, for all our paying conditions and safety, and for the future of transport and health as well. So that's absolutely inspirational. Our next speaker is Dr. Jackie Applebee, who's involved with Doctors in Unite, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the health dimensions that Pat touched on. So over to you, Jackie.
Morning, everyone, and thanks so much for having me. And solidarity from Doctors in Unite. Not many people know that Unite has a very small doctors branch, and we've been meeting every Sunday since the pandemic, since the beginning of the pandemic, because of the awfulness of it, really. So we want to send solidarity to you. And before I go into the sort of more public healthy aspects of this, really, I mean, fire and rehire, there's just too much of it. At the moment, well, there shouldn't be any of it. There's far too much of it, and we've seen it in the health service, and it just attacks people's terms and conditions. Wages go down, and it absolutely has to be resisted. And if you look at COVID disproportionately affects the poorer in society. So if your wages are going to go down, I mean, the extrapolation is you're going to be more at risk from COVID. People live in multi-generational households. I mean, your bus drivers, you're an essential service. Schools are going back. They're going back sort of without any staggering, aren't they? And you're going to be having crowded buses again. And if you don't get a chance to have any break between after your 2.5 hours, presumably there's no chance to clean the bus, you're at risk. I don't know what your PPE is like, but if it's like ours, it's not very good at all. And all the evidence shows that if you have proper PPE, health workers who work on intensive care and health workers in China, studies have shown that if you have proper PPE, they don't get COVID hardly at all, whereas the people who do get PPE in hospitals and in the health service are people like cleaners who are on the wards, who are exposed to the virus and don't have the proper PPE. So there's a double whammy going on. And so this has to be resisted. And we know from the budget last week, we know who's going to be expected to pay for the crisis, the COVID pandemic. It's not going to be the super rich. The rich are getting richer. We've seen that. It's going to be, workers. And I think now we have to stand together and we have to say, we're not going to accept this. And if we don't stand together, we'll be made to suffer. And so we have to we have to stand together. So, in the health service, we've been offered a 1% pay rise. And there is going to be, hopefully, resistance against that, because it's a real terms pay cut, isn't it? And that has been since 2010. We've all had real terms pay cuts. So your strike is really important. Your strike is our strike. Your fight is our fight. If you win, then everybody else has more confidence to go out and on strike and to fight for a fairer society. So COVID is spread inside, it's not spread outside. And the hypocrisy that they're sort of trying to, stop the right to protest. So Karen Reisman, who's been fined £10,000 last weekend, the Sarah Everard vigil tonight, COVID is, I'm sure there is small risk of getting COVID outside, but it's inside. It's indoor airborne spread, which has been shown time and time again to be responsible. The longer you spend in an enclosed environment without PPE, the higher the chances that you're going to pick up COVID. And a bus, if you're inside in a bus, you can't, especially in the winter, you can't have been having the windows open, but you're going to be really, really exposed. So the risks of you as bus drivers are really quite high. Outside, you're not, we're being told we can't protest when the risk is quite small. So it's really, really important, and it's really important that you don't blink first, really. And the government have been really loath to change the health and safety advice. Public Health England have been really slow to change the public health advice about indoor airborne spread of COVID. And we can see why that is, because it then lets employers off the hook. They don't have to make the environment safe. They don't have to look at ventilation. They don't have to look at having people spread out, things that would all be costly to them, but which would save lives. And I know at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of bus drivers disproportionately did get and die of COVID. So it's, those are the sort of the basic and broad public aspects. We can't expect the vaccine to get us out of the hole completely on its own. It's going to help, I hope so. I've been doing a lot of vaccinating, but it's not going to completely get us out of the hole. We need to be doing what other countries are doing. What we haven't done in this country is locally based, community-driven, find, test, trace, isolate and support. What this government have done, instead of investing in public health locally, they've invested billions. I think now the latest figure, 37 billion, which is a third of the cost, the annual budget of the health service, in the privatised national test and trace system, which does not has been woeful. It hasn't performed at all, which is run by Dido Harding, who is married to a Tory MP. So you see where all this is going. So I think I've had my 5 minutes, but solidarity to all of you. Your fight is our fight. Thank you for leading the resistance of the working class, and we look forward to joining you as health workers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie, and thank you. I know you've got to get off and can't stay for the whole of the meeting, but thank you very much for managing to join us for that. That's really appreciated. Manchester isn't the only part of the country seeing bus strikes at the moment. There's also thousands of workers involved in bus strikes in London, and we're really pleased to have Ian May, who's one of the Unite reps in London, involved in the strikes at RATP. So can we hear from you, Ian?
Yes. Oh, frog in my throat there. Good morning, comrades. In London, we've already got the race to the bottom that Pat mentioned. Private operators tender for the routes, and whoever gets the cheapest price, whoever puts in the cheapest price, gets the contract. So that's forcing the operators to cut their costs. What they've done at my company is we went for a pay rise before COVID. which we rejected. Everything got suspended for several months over the past year. So we're still dealing with a pay rise that's due from 2019. The company came back with an offer of 0.5%. However, they then wanted to change all their terms and conditions, which, after taking away various allowances and increasing our unpaid breaks, amounted to a pay cut of around £2,000 to £2,500 a year. So it's not fire and rehire, but it's sort of a halfway house to that. We've had 5 days of industrial action, not continuous. We've had 3 days and then 2 days, and there's another day lined up for Wednesday. We have met with the management. They have made some concessions, but what we need them to do now is to take the new contracts off the table, because what happens as soon as a driver wants to go to another garage or they want to change routes, the company says, yeah, okay, but you need to sign the new contract. Now, the new contracts are what we're fighting against, what they were trying to bring in. So they're then getting the £2,000 a year cuts, driver by driver, by the back door, and we cannot be accepting that. We've also asked for a pay rise to at least meet RPI, otherwise it's a cut in real terms of 0.5%, and we need them to also look at the other proposal they came through with, was increasing our working day to 10 hours. Now, 10 hours driving, yes, that's legal, but driving a bus for 5 hours in city traffic, whether it be in London or Manchester, is very stressful. And we also suffer, believe it or not, in London, we suffer from a complete lack of toilet facilities on many routes. Drivers get to the end of the route, there's absolutely nowhere to go, so they've got to wait till they get back to the other end of the route to be able to use the toilet. You know, in 2021, in major cities in the UK, it's just simply not acceptable. So yes, we get the prostrate problems, we get the back problems because the seats on the buses aren't particularly good. So we get all of those medical issues as well. That's pandemic across the industry. We've also said, hey, some of the other operators have been given a COVID bonus for working through the pandemic. Unite had to fight to get safety procedures in place for cabs being sealed so that drivers had got some protection from busfuls of passengers that were possibly asymptomatic. And so it's a battle. Again, as I say, part of this race to the bottom that seems to be prevalent within the transport industry, and I'm understanding that it's also not just confined to the bus industry, but it's confined to it's in the taxi industry, and also the railways are trying it as well. So we need to fight it on all accounts.
Thanks very much, Ian. That's great, and solidarity for your own strike as well.
Thank you.
Hope you get a good result as soon as possible. So one of the issues I touched on at the start was the fact that in trying to break the strike, the various companies, they're subcontracting some of the Go North West are subcontracting some of the strike breaking operation, and they're often using vehicles that are simply not accessible, that don't meet the standards as coaches running on normal service routes. So it's particularly good to be able to introduce Dennis Queen from Manchester Disabled People Against Cuts. Dennis.
Hi there, hello everyone. Thanks Ian, and power and solidarity to all our striking bus drivers. I'm mixed Dennis Queen, my pronouns are she or anything really. I am here on behalf of Manchester Disabled People Against Cuts, in some sense to represent the interests of disabled people in relation to your campaign. Buses are a subject dear to my heart as an electric powered wheelchair user who uses them to achieve access to the city. I can't drive because I have a slight visual impairment, so as a busy parent, peer advocate and musician, I'm totally reliant on public transport to have an ordinary family and work life, alongside many other members of the public, disabled and non-disabled. It's even more important to me personally as someone who's still part of the networks which fought for disabled people's access to transport in the 1980s and 1990s. Some of you long-term transport workers will remember a network called DAN, the Disabled People's Direct Action Network. We hijacked buses up and down the country. We were arrested hundreds of times until individual companies and then the government agreed to invest in redesigned buses with new systems, new practices, and newly trained drivers who understood better the needs of the public. When I get on a bus now, I'm always beaming because I can do it, just because I can do it. And I silently thank those activists and people in the transport industry who furthered our access so that many more of us can take part in ordinary life. It's not a privilege that we will ever take for granted. Not just my access, but we expect improved access for other disabled people, including autistic and learning disabled people, visually impaired people, deaf and hard of hearing people, and people of all ages with a variety of other physical and complex needs. So it fills me with anger at Go Ahead North West that our bus drivers in North Manchester are being treated so terribly that they have been forced to go on strike. And just to be really clear, we're not going to allow our access to be used against you in this fight. This has led to accessible buses on our North Manchester routes with properly trained drivers who understand everyone's different needs, now being replaced by out-of-date buses that have reduced access and drivers with reduced skills. There has been overcrowding on the buses as well. Overcrowding is not only dangerous, it's an access issue which prevents disabled passengers from using the bus at all. I have seen complaints submitted by drivers about the quality of the buses. I have seen the photographs of what the buses that are going down these routes. And it's absolutely clear that there's been no access on some routes. The reply to complaints to Go North West didn't even respond to the lack of disability access in their reply. They simply say they don't have control over the contractors. However, we will be writing to the local authority and Transport for Greater Manchester this week, as Go do have a contract with this city, and part of it is providing access for disabled passengers, just like our black taxi drivers, who, if they will not provide us access, cannot be licensed to use our streets. The state of affairs should not be acceptable. It is not a true public transport system, and it's not what the public deserve. When disabled people are cut off from public transport, we're cut off from food, healthcare, support, jobs, education, and our friends and families. It affects our children, our partners, our colleagues and friends as well. And just a few words on the next topic, because it's been covered a lot already by people who know much more than me. But I'm also an employer. I employ 2 support staff in my home, and I also sit on 2 committees where we have responsibility for staff. So I know a thing or two about how to treat employees ethically and employment law. The conditions that our striking drivers are being expected to work in are unacceptable. I would expect my staff to leave if I treated them this way, let alone strike. Fire and rehire practices are a disgrace and just a way for the employer to avoid taking the due responsibility to offer the sick pay and other benefits that people who are in reality long-term workers like mine are entitled to. Drivers are in a high-risk job due to the amount of people you're in contact with. Your need for full sick pay is required. Your need for full sick pay, if required, is more than clear. It's a high-stress job at the moment, so your need for proper paid holidays, breaks, and other things.
Up, please, Dennis.
Sorry, other things that workers should be entitled to are very clear. So yes, I've not forgotten that some of our drivers are disabled people too. We'll continue to support you and share your campaign and encourage our activists and supporters to write to David Brown and ask him to meet your demands. Solidarity.
Thanks very much, Dennis. Our next speaker is Rebecca Long-Bailey, who's one of the MPs who's been down to the picket line, which is always good to see. So over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks very much, Ian, and thanks so much for letting me come and speak today. We've had so many brilliant speakers, and at the start of the pandemic, I was contacted by bus drivers who were frightened. I remember this was at the time when the government was talking about herd immunity. We saw other countries across the world locking down, and we were still carrying on as if nothing else was happening. And they were frightened for themselves and their families. And then as the pandemic progressed, I heard how some of them had lost colleagues to the deadly virus, unfortunately. But they kept going as bus drivers because they felt they had a moral duty to keep the country going. They transported our key workers, our nurses, our supermarket workers, our doctors, our paramedics around the country and around Greater Manchester. And they did it with minimal fuss and minimal health and safety protection and a high exposure to risk, as you've heard. Even the Office for National Statistics recently found that bus drivers were one of the occupational groups with raised rates of COVID-19 deaths. So imagine, with all of this as a backdrop and worry and sacrifice of the last 12 months, you receive a knock at the door. A man comes up your driveway, knocks on your door, and hands you a letter. You can see that all the neighbours can see what's going on. And swirling around your head is what they're thinking. Do they think it's bailiffs? Do they think it's worse, the police? And you just want the floor to open up and swallow you up. So then you open up that envelope and it reveals your worst fears. Your employer's telling you that unless you accept a significant reduction in your terms and conditions, you're going to face the sack. Now, most of us would think that that was morally reprehensible, and it is. We'd think that it belongs in the books of some Dickensian novel, and it does. But that's what's happened to Go North West drivers, and it's absolutely disgraceful. Now, it's happening everywhere, right across the country. According to the TUC, they say that 1 in 10 workers have been told to reapply for their jobs on worse terms since the lockdown started in March last year. And as John Hendy QC and Keith Ewing from the Institute for Employment Rights said, that workers have become commodified. They've become vulnerable and disposable commodities. And that's why it's so important for us to support the drivers at Go North West, because what we're seeing here is a race to the bottom. If it happens there, it's going to start happening in bus depots right across Greater Manchester. Now, the whole dispute surrounds, as you've heard from Pat, around proposals by the company to reduce costs. They say that the reduction of these costs are essential to the financial health of the company overall. Yet when you look at the Go Ahead Group's financial reports on their own website, they're reporting quite a healthy 12 months. They're not reporting financial difficulty. So it's understandable that drivers are perplexed when they're being told that they've got to make that significant compromise and give away their hard-won rights and protections in return for saving the financial health of the company, when that doesn't seem to be applied to the CEO's salary, for example. Now, the union has been trying to negotiate over the last 12 months. It is true that the union have made significant compromises, and those compromises haven't been accepted, such as they look to revise the sick pay scheme. They look to get an independent auditor to come in and have a look at scheduling, for example. They looked at extending the unpaid time during meal breaks for a period of 2 years, after which it could be assessed. All of that was refused by the company. And unfortunately, talks broke down. And as you know, we're now in a strike situation. Another worrying aspect to all of this was what can only be described as a bribe. Now, drivers were offered a sweetener, a £5,000 payment, in order to accept this scrapping of many of their terms and conditions. It didn't account for the loss in future pay nor the rolling back of those terms and conditions. And although the company might say that it was voluntary, I would call it duress. And it's no wonder why most drivers at the depot felt that they had no option but to accept these reduced contracts, because where else are they going to go at a time of profound uncertainty and unemployment? And that's why this is so more disgusting than it would have even been in normal economic times.
Could
Now,
you
we've got a role.
please, Rebecca?
Fantastic. Yeah, we've got a role. We've got to make sure that we keep supporting these workers because they deserve to be treated with respect and dignity by their employer. And I hope that that happens over the coming weeks. But ultimately, we've got to campaign for a change in the law to scrap fire and hire overall. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. And on your point about Go Ahead's finances, I know one comment a lot of people in Manchester have been making is that, you know, if we had a publicly owned bus service that was here to actually serve the community rather than make a company money, the debate would be a little bit different, wouldn't it? So our last speaker is Dave Roberts, who's a Unite Regional Officer covering the dispute.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, everyone. I think Pat and obviously Rebecca have touched on a lot of the things that obviously are going on in the dispute. But one of the things, you know, something like the £5,000, you know, it's £2.5 million altogether that the group are investing to go northwest to pay these drivers to take their terms and conditions and to induce them. Now, you know, we've asked for that money to be invested in the depot, in the fleet. You know, they're running buses that are 13, 15 years old. They're falling apart. They're not fit for purpose. You know, Dennis said before about, you know, accessibility, safety. You know, these buses aren't right for that. And this is where it should be spent. We should be looking at the future, you know, looking at the Manchester in itself and the green side and getting these buses that, you know, are fit to be out in the public domain and, you know, keeping people safe, not spreading fumes everywhere. Again, the state of the fleet as well causes a lot of the costs in the company as well. You know, the drivers are getting the blame for everything in a way. They're getting hit with the reduction in terms and conditions and overall reduction in pay. When, yeah, again, this fleet of buses are costing thousands of pounds a week to maintain, yet they'd rather spend £2.5 million attacking our drivers. I suppose going back, the company are so aggressive that they don't come across as having any empathy at all for employees. The propaganda they keep putting out on Facebook and in the press, saying how the drivers are being unreasonable and we need this to turn the company around, when it's absolute lies. What they don't tell you as well is that, you know, there's well over £1 million worth of savings being offered on the table and a commitment to work with the company further to make further changes. But yet they won't tell you that. They'll just tell people that we've walked away. It was Go Northwest that walked away in January. We thought we were going well with our proposals. And on the 16th of January, on a Saturday morning, we all received a letter saying, on the Monday, we'll be bringing your members in individually for consultations, and they'll have 7 days to sign a contract. And if they do not sign a contract, they'll be dismissed. Horrendous, absolutely horrendous. Worse than that as well, they wouldn't allow any representation from our reps, like Pat. As they said, it's a redundancy situation. You don't have to do that. However, it wasn't just a redundancy consultation. At the end of these meetings, if people were not going to sign up or sign up in 7 days, they were being dismissed, which is like a disciplinary. And in our eyes, they should have a representation. On the back of that, the members put grievances in, individual grievances, how they're being treated and how they've had to sign under duress. The company have turned their nose up on that and said, we're not accepting your grievance, doesn't form part of the process. Again, another statutory right, they refuse to take it on. It could go on and on. It's horrendous, and they have no thought for anything but themselves. And for me, we are trying our best, and I have, you know, I've worked with the reps for a long time, and they are really trying their best to get this put in place so we can get a deal for all the members and you know, get back to work. No one wants to be on strike, by the way, but this is what we have to do. And the continuous strike was the only way we could make it clear how much this needed to be sorted out. This dispute has got to come to an end, but the company have got to come to the table on it as well. £2,500 a year for most drivers to lose is just, that's not even thinkable in this time. And the sick pay in the middle of the pandemic, to attack that is an absolute disgrace. I don't know how any company could think of that, doing that, especially with the low amount of savings that they're trying to bring from it. But yeah, the massive impact it'll have on the members at that company. We're trying to tell people to stay off and not come come to work with any illness to protect the country, protect the people you're around, but yet you're going to take pay off them. We've even got recently ministers writing to companies saying, use the government grants to pay your sick pay, to pay for anyone who's having a vaccination, anyone who's having to self-isolate, use that now. All this surround them, and yet they still want to tax sick pay. You know, we just need to keep fighting this. Firing eye has got no place in the modern Britain. It should be outlawed as far as I'm concerned. And the sooner we can fight this and get it moved on, the better. By solidarity to everyone who's in dispute or having any issues, the workplaces, you know, we're all together. Massive support from everyone outside. So thanks again. And yeah, solidarity. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Dave. So, Dave was the last of our speakers, so we've now got some time for discussion.
Hello, comrades. My name's Kath. I'm from Socialist Alternative. I just want to make a few comments. As we know, Greater Manchester Combined Authority has launched its consultation doing buses differently. Mayor Andy Burnham and City Leader Richard Leese should warn Go Northwest and the other bus companies that are thinking of doing this that they are going to have to respect the unions if they want to retain the franchise. We need a bus service that provides unionised, secure, well-paid jobs for drivers, as well as a cheap, reliable and comprehensive service for the public. Our regional Labour councillors, MPs and the Mayor should be demanding no race to the bottom in our services. It's not a lot to ask for £1 million worth of political levy, is it? Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Firstly, solidarity with all the guys up in Manchester. I'm a I'm a London bus driver as well. I also sit on United's London Regional Council. One thing I would like to add to this story that's not been mentioned yet is another attack on bus drivers. We're in the process of balloting Metroline drivers in London because they're trying to introduce something called remote sign-on. What remote sign-on is going to do is strip them of hours work, so they'll be working for longer days for no extra pay. Imagine if you're a factory worker or you work somewhere, you go into your company, you log yourself on, and you're paid from that time that you start till the time you clock off at the end of the day. With this new system, what they want to do is you sign on the bus. So you don't go to work now, you go and meet your bus somewhere, wherever it may be, and you log on the bus, so you're paid for only the time that you're actually steering the bus and your hands are on the wheel. So that means lunch hours, all this sort of stuff. You're just paid for the time you're on the wheel. So we're going to lose loads of time. You're going to have extra hours travelling because you don't just go to your work. Most people live near to their garage. You know, if they lose a route that's close to them and have one the other side of London, you've got to travel to the other side of London. So you're not going to pick up that. So you're going to turn in your 10-hour day into 12 hours, 13 hours. So in effect, what it's turning drivers into is 0 hours contract workers on buses, totally deprofessionalise the industry, turn them all into basically slaves on the bus. You know, as everyone said, there's a lack of toilet facilities. Nobody seems interested in doing that. We've been fighting that for years. And you know, they put up a toilet, don't even bother to clean it after that. You know, you walk in there, you wouldn't let your dog in most of these toilets in London. So it's an absolute disgrace what they're doing at the moment. They're attacking bus drivers left, right and centre, and we've got to do everything we can to stop it. And I say again, solidarity with the Manchester guys, fight it all the way, and solidarity with all the London bus drivers that are soon going to be out too. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. And I'd echo that solidarity to all of the bus drivers and people elsewhere taking action. It'd be great in the course of the discussion if people do have questions as well. That's fine. It'd be great to get some discussion practically about what people can do to organise solidarity. I know people have been doing an enormous amount already, from raising money, lobbying of politicians, mithering the CEO of the Go Ahead group. you know, visiting the picket line, taking direct action, putting posters and stickers up. There's been a huge range of stuff, so it'd be good to get some of that out in the discussion as well.
Thank you, Chair. Solidarity greetings, everyone. Declan Poon. I'm the branch secretary of the RMT Southampton District Bus and Coach branch here in Southampton. I'm also secretary of the Trades Council within our city. I give full solidarity and support, of course, for both of those organisations. We stand ready to act in solidarity and help in the campaign in any way that you see fit. I sit here before you as a sacked bus worker, because one of the other things that we've noticed that's happened since lockdown is that there has been, from certainly bus operating companies in my area, a bit of a lax attitude towards health and safety. I think they kind of see that now as a bit of an inconvenience and an expense they're not willing to meet. I reported a bus that hit a bridge here in Hampshire, a railway bridge. Now, for any bus drivers here will know there's a very strict process and policy to follow in those circumstances. The company weren't willing to follow them. I said that as the health and safety lead in my branch, that I would make that report myself. They didn't. I made the report, and they've sacked me for bringing the company into disrepute and making a false and malicious call to Network Rail. It's a quite egregious and outrageous allegation that we are, of course, fighting. I'm under appeal at the moment, and my union, the RMT, has said that if they uphold my dismissal, we will be going into dispute with my company. My company is part of the Go Ahead group. We're in Go South Coast area. What's going on in the firing hire there? I'm extremely confident, actually, that if Go Northwest is successful in pushing through what they're trying to achieve here, it will be pushed across all other both train and bus operating companies that they currently operate. So I'm saying that your fight is our fight. It's not just a fight of bus workers. It's a bus fight for everywhere. Same with British Gas, who are having the same attacks to their terms and conditions. What I see happening under the cover of COVID is the employers are now trying to create a huge bonfire of terms and conditions. And let's face it, I believe that we bus workers are already low paid. Our terms and conditions haven't been the best before these attacks started, and it like has been said before, it is a race to the bottom. We know that it's been driven under the cover of COVID. What Joanne was saying there about remote sign-on, they're pushing that through here with another bus company in Southampton. They were trying all of these things before COVID, and I think COVID has now come along and has given them the cover. Because most workers, let's be honest, have got their heads down. They're quite fearful for their jobs and their futures. So they're using that as the opportunity. I'll leave it there, but massive solidarity and good luck. If just one question, if you've got a campaign page, maybe you put it up in the chat there, we could I could pass that around to my comrades down here. Thank you and solidarity.
Thanks very much, Ian. I think this is a tremendous dispute. It's quite clear. If you go to the picket line, that the drivers are very, very confident, and it's also very clear that this is a must-win dispute for Unite, and Unite have done a really good job, I think, of organising and postering and all the rest of it. But it's quite clear that this is a key dispute, not just for Manchester, but for the whole industry. And a lot of people are watching this. A lot of other franchises are watching. And so it's important, I think, that, you know, we aim to win this dispute, that the drivers aim to win this dispute as quickly as possible. And I think I would ask a couple of questions, really, and hopefully that perhaps Dave or other people from Unite could answer. It seems to me that we, especially after the last speaker, Declan, that we need to look at spreading this dispute across the Go franchise, Go brand. Other regions regional franchises will be looking for a defeat of the workers in Manchester. And are there any plans to get ballot-ready situations in other franchise within the Go franchise? And also, are there any plans, which personally I think there should be, to coordinate this dispute with other public transport sections and beyond that, if that matters? particularly I'm thinking about the rail. There's a tremendous danger that the government will subsidise this dispute. They will overlook all these complaints about disability access and illegally driven buses, drivers going beyond their legitimate hours. That they will sweep all that under the carpet and continue to subsidise Go Northwest to defeat the workers, just as they did on the rail with the DOO dispute in Southern Region. And I just really would appeal to comrades to think, let's not just let this dispute run. It's got to be brought to a head, and I think we could see the bus drivers win a famous victory.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think most of what I wanted to ask has been covered by other people. My points were that if we allow this to happen on Go Northwest, it's going to spread like a fire. We've already seen it with the 0 hour contracts, which are just like a plague throughout industry, that are dragging all our young people down, making their lives uncertain. If we allow this to go through, you might as well, I've said to everybody I've spoken to, you might as well take your contract of employment, whatever industry you're in, and hang it up on a nail in your toilet, because that's all it's going to be worth. That's the bottom line. I just wanted to say as well, I mean, there are some harsh things being said by some of the bus drivers who are working for some of the operators covering our services. And I understand that their point of view, that they're being told in non-unionised companies that they've got to work, but they've also got to understand that their rates of pay inevitably follow ours. Yes, we are, relatively speaking, at the top of the pile in Manchester. Reducing our conditions of service, giving us less money, less time at home, isn't going to help them. It's actually going to reduce their chances of aspiring to our conditions of service. You've never, ever given a man an improved condition of service by taking away the condition of service of another man.
Thank you, Chair. And this is particularly aimed at the Go Northwest rep and officer. Sorry, I'm a branch secretary of Suffolk and Essex Road Haulage. And I can promise you that what the other speakers have said is absolutely true, because we are seeing similar attacks in our area as well. And a victory in Manchester is going to be a significant help in raising the confidence of people that it can be fought. I'm also on the executive of Unite, and we have been paying close attention to what's been going on in Northwest. I can assure you. Two things about that. The first is you seem to have your neck, your feet on the neck of Go Ahead back in September. You got yourselves reinstated. The rep, I believe it was you, reinstated. You got the fire and rehire apparently taken off the table. What's changed in the last 3 months to give them the cockiness to come back? The second thing is I absolutely agree with the suggestion, and perhaps Joanne would want to have a chat with us after this meeting. The call would probably have to come from the members concerned or their reps. But the idea that there should be a national convocation of go-ahead reps right across the country, and not just, as has been pointed out, necessarily in road passenger transport, but in their other franchises as well, seems to me to be a very, very good idea in terms of making sure the company knows you've bitten off more than you can chew. Simple question, I hope you've received a check from the branch by now in terms of solidarity. Our members are very, very supportive of you. And the other last final point is it does seem to me we are facing a choice in this country now. And it goes to what the doctor said earlier on as well. We can either have a safe public transport system, or we can have a profitable one. And it's quite clear which one the governors are going for. And as long as it remains a privatised, deregulated industry on the rail and on road passenger transport, we are the ones, the workers in the industry and the users of the industry, that are going to suffer to swell the bank balances of the owners. Thank you very much indeed, and solidarity both to you and to the health workers fighting for decent conditions as well. Ta.
First of all, I think one of our comrades before, Catherine, was talking about local sort of authority before we go national, about the Good Employer Charter, which has come out today, and which today it's been out for a while now, but it's something we're working on as today. And part of this should be, you know, companies, the authority and companies should work with the unions as well. We should have unionised workplaces involved with any franchising. They should be working together, and it looks to me that, I don't want to speak out of turn too much, but CFGM haven't done as much as we'd have expected in this dispute. You know, they're letting these rogue operators drive around with double loaded buses in COVID, and it says to me that they'd be prepared to let a race to the bottom happen. It seems to me, can we get the lowest bid in? Can we get the cheapest? They're allowing it now, although it's not part of the franchise, and it's almost an insight, I feel, as to what could be, and it's a massive concern that what we're seeing in Manchester, allowing these road operators to drive unfit for purpose buses, overloaded, this could be a thing in the future. So the fight locally has to be about, you know, stopping the councils and saying to them, look, this can't be, you know, this can't be what our future is going to be. This isn't going to be what we want to see. Is that we're going to have these road operators taking all the franchise and taking these routes up and then putting 15-year-old buses on. I think nationally we have spoke. We spoke with our national officer as well. We need to come together, not just Go Ahead Group. You know, all the bus companies. I think there needs to be a lot more organisation around that. But what Richard did talk about then as well, about Go Ahead, and not just, you know, passenger services, but, you know, all the groups involved with Go Ahead. We need to start organising within that, and, you know, it's a great point, and that's something where we need to move forward on 100%. I think Richard asked about as well was about why the company went from stopping the Section 188 and then sort of turning on us. The agreement that it was paused. It was never sort of taken off the table. The Section 188 being a gun to our head for as long as August, and what happened, we got an agreement that they paused that while we went into negotiations. The issue with it is that at any time they could stop that pause and carry that on, and that's exactly what they did. We're in negotiations thinking we're going the right way, and at the point on the 16th of January, we said it's not paused and we're carrying on, and that's what happened. I actually get the feeling every time we got to a point where we were going to get to a decision to get an agreement, the company moved away, because I truly don't believe they want to agree on this. I truly believe it's not always just about the money. There's a control element to it as well. Away from the things that will save them the money, there's a lot of other changes they want to bring in with contracts, flexibility agreements that mean people can't be at home with their families as long, agreements that mean people who've waited a long time to get family-friendly duties to look after children, elderly parents, disabled partners, they're not going to be able to do. So it's not just about money in terms as well. There's a big control element as well. That's part of this. And I do feel that when we're getting close to deciding the agreements which are costing the money, they move away because they want to deal with the control elements which we're not prepared to negotiate on. There's no monetary value. This is about money, what they've processed towards the Section 188. The other things they want to talk about, they bring no money to it whatsoever. So we're not going to agree on that anytime soon.
It was more a question inspired by one of the other speakers and many things that people have said today. Really, it's a question to the drivers and your representatives. Do disabled people need to be holding up Manchester route? What are you calling them? Rogue buses instead of scab buses? Okay, rogue buses. Are things that bad? And will you let us know if they are that bad? Please get in touch with me.
Thanks, Dennis. That's an excellent question, but I suspect one that Unite people in a public meeting probably can't answer in the affirmative. But yeah, that's something possibly to chat about another time.
Hi, yeah, I'm Sam Harvey. I'm the communications rep at the Union branch at Queen's Road. I've been overwhelmed by the support from everyone, so I don't want to ask a question. I just want to say thanks to the other union reps, thanks to the local MPs, thanks to the general public for supporting us. And I want to say solidarity to everybody else who was in a dispute. Solidarity, everyone. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Sam, and right back at you. I can see from everybody, solidarity to you.
Solidarity with everyone at Queen's Road and people across the country facing this fire and rehire. It's a disgusting situation to be in. I think one of the things that people have touched on and mentioned is, this is an attack which, if it succeeds, will inevitably be rolled out across the industry and to different industries around the country. And that's one of the reasons I think why many people in Manchester have been so enraged by it, that people in the community have even took action to support the drivers, and to the extent of there's been some disruption of services and things like that. And I think we've got to think very carefully about what we're doing, because if these kind of tactics are allowed to succeed, then it will be rolled out across industry. So I think there is something to be said about solidarity and people across the country working to put pressure on Go Northwest. It's all part of a wider campaign, isn't it? There's got to be political interventions. There's got to be talking to MPs, to councillors, to transport authorities, letting people know that buses are being used that aren't fit for disabled people. That's got to be highlighted, and people have got to be held up to a standard. If social distancing rules apply, then they've got to apply on buses that are provided by any company. So we need to make sure that those rules are upheld. We need to ensure that there is equality under the law for disabled people to use public transport. That's got to be enforced. And I think people across the country who are concerned about these issues should be looking to take action to ensure that these things are upheld. I think people need to talk about it and build the campaign to ensure that this takes place across the country.
Ian mentioned some concrete ways in which we can support bus drivers. Actually, myself, together with 5 of my co-workers in the meat factory, we went to the picket line, gave a card signed by about 40-50 people in the factory I work to the strikers, and I think it was very well received. And it raised the scope of many of my co-workers of what we can do against the boss's attacks on us where we work. 3 years no pay rise, things like that. I think Patrick maybe remembers this, but also I'm a candidate at the local elections for the Communist League in Boston, and on the campaign trail we met many workers. For instance, an Amazon driver who says his targets have been increased constantly by the bosses, but there is no union in Amazon. But he and his co-workers are talking about it now, and again, these seeing a union fight can raise people's scopes of how they can push back the assaults by the bosses, etc. And I also just have a question for Patrick. I think it's already been mentioned by a few people. The gas engineers organized by the GMB, they face a similar strike, really, and a similar questions of fire and rehire, longer hours for the same pay, and things like that. And they have a picket line at every Monday and Friday at it's a little office they have in Stockport, British Gas, and they're there every Monday and Friday. Is there a way that these two strikes can meet up, and build on each other's fights? So that's a concrete question I have.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm Evan Pritchard. I'm chair of the Greater Manchester Unites community branch. We've been supporting the drivers from as soon as we first heard about the dispute back in whenever it was, when everything was first brewing. And I'm also affiliations organizer for Manchester Trades Council. Just a couple of things I wanted to say. First of all, it's great to see people from all over the country here. as well as obviously a lot of people from Manchester, including people representing trades councils. I just wanted to say, because the chat's been disabled, I couldn't ask Declan Clune separately, that way, if he could get his, but if he could get the details of his issue to Manchester Trades, I think Trades Council, I mean, I think that's one in particular that I think we'd like to keep an eye on. Now, it seems to me one of the biggest problems that we face are the anti-union laws. And yet again, I think this issue has raised its ugly head when you've seen like the ability of people to be able to, or lack of ability of people to picket other than at their own workplace. And while that doesn't stop people fighting, workers fighting, or many people doing all kinds of things to support them, which has been referred to both by the chair and by Ben Clay and other people, which I think we really do continue to need to bear in mind the need to fight to get rid of these laws. And perhaps some of this, one or more of the speakers might want to comment on that. Perhaps Rebecca, I think it would be good to get a comment on that. And then finally, I'd like to appeal to anyone. I mean, this may seem like a strange, once upon a time, it would have been a very strange thing to say at a meeting like this. Sadly, the world has changed a little bit. I'd like to appeal to anyone here who's not in a union to join one. I've been really impressed at the efforts my union, Unite, have been putting into this dispute and by the level of organisation at Queen's Road, and not least because of the spirit of the members involved. But I think we need to get, the unions do need to, we need more members basically. And I think membership will increase through successful struggle, you know, but it is a great need in any event. And if you live or work in Manchester and you're in a union branch that's not affiliated to Manchester Trades Council, please consider doing so. The details are on our website, and perhaps Ian, you'd like to put them in the chat.
Okay, hi everyone. Yeah, okay, my name's Tom. I'm a Unite member and a member of Socialist Alternative as well. Yeah, I guess, you know, there's a lot of agreement in here, isn't there, from, you know, all comrades present about the fact that, you know, managers and employers are kind of like looking, you know, to this dispute, looking to this effort to introduce these firing and rehire measures, almost as a bit of a kind of like experiment, a bit of a test about what they can get away with, you know, when trying to implement similar, you know, kind of measures themselves. So I guess, you know, that kind of really hammers home just how significant this dispute is. You know, it's not just about the impact of workers in one depot. It's about workers, not just in other franchises, but, you know, across Greater Manchester and the country as a whole. And there was the comrade talking about British Gas and the dispute that they're having in Stockport, facing very similar kind of attacks from the employers. Yeah, and I mean, you know, we'd all be in agreement that that makes it all the more important that we do what we can to show like active solidarity with the drivers. But also, like, I think one thing that we need to kind of like think about a little bit as well, and I'm sure, you know, many of us have been thinking about this, is how we can reach out to the public as well and find like, you know, wider solidarity and support from people who, you know, might be thinking, well, you know, I rely on this bus service on a day-to-day basis. You know, these drivers are the people that ensure that I can actually go and do my job as a key worker or a worker in any kind of sector. You know, so to attack their terms and conditions is, you know, absolutely, you know, kind of like unacceptable. That's something we should think about in terms of like material that can be produced to like reach out to the public, you know, potentially in the name of Unite in the form of like leaflets and stuff like that. And I think like, you know, there's a lot of kind of like points of solidarity that are being drawn out in this meeting, you know, in a really positive way, where, you know, we're talking about the conditions of NHS workers and how, you know, the battles that NHS workers are waging, you know, to get their 15% pay rise. But also, yeah, I think it's really good to see someone from see the comrade from Disabled People Against Cuts here as well, because one point that we also need to really hammer when we're talking to, you know, commuters who, you know, need to be, you know, kind of reached out to, you know, to gain their support, is just how much disabled people's rights are going to be affected, you know, by these measures, but also like by the creation of the scab services by the company Going North West. That'll mean, you know, going kind of like all out to actually win this as quickly as we possibly can by approaching all other kind of like sectors of the trade union movement. Yeah, sure, yeah. But also there's the quite important case now of workers in the Communication Workers Union getting balloted as well. So there's potentially going to be more industrial action in that front coming forward in the next few months. So preparation for like joint activities and potentially joint demonstrations where possible should be something considered in these cases too. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks very much, Tom. And on the subject of connections, one of the things that's really amused me is how some of the supporters of the strike, obviously not the strikers themselves, have been copying some of the tactics from anti-fracking protesters and doing slow walking up the road, where picketing by the workers themselves wouldn't be allowed under the anti-union laws that Evan mentioned. So it just shows how, what appear on the face of it completely unrelated campaigns actually come together, and obviously getting a better bus service is vital for tackling climate change as well.
Yeah, greetings. My name's Ozzy. I'm from Unite Cambridge Engineering Branch and chair of London Eastern's Engineering Manufacturing and Steel Regional Sector Committee. I'd like to send our solidarity from our risk to the Manchester bus drivers, and obviously your fight is our fight, and I really hope you win this because this fire and rehire is becoming endemic. I mean, literally, it's like SPS Technologies, good Lord, British Gas, is like, the list is long and it's getting longer. There's even a coffee plant in Oxford, for God's sake, that is trying to fire and rehire its entire workforce and attack its terms and conditions. So I'm here to express our solidarity with your movement. And actually, also like to thank Becky Long Bailey for turning up to the picket line. I really hope that more Labour MPs would so do, and I backed her in the leadership campaign, and damn Starmer to hell. Just a personal opinion, obviously. Just a question I've got to ask. So what is the current legal advice regarding COVID and picket lines? Hopefully I'm going to get a positive answer, because after the recent police thing and the attacking the right of protesters to organise solidarity with the poor woman by that cop down in London this afternoon. That's quite terrible, by the way. Yeah, so like if someone could express an opinion, and I think now is actually the time for something that the officers won't be able to commit to in the meeting, obviously, and have some very large trucks suspiciously break down on scab industrial estates to stop them damn buses, because we need to win this. And on a final point, Joe, I love you to death, but you're not on the London Regional Committee, if you like. There isn't a London Regional Committee. It's called London Eastern, or as we call it in Cambridge, Eastern and London. Thank you very much.
Ozzy, just on the picketing and the law, there's an explicit exemption for pickets in the coronavirus regulations. The arguments that have been going on in the last week or so, and I see we've got Karen Reisman in the meeting, we've been about the Regulation 6 has a more general exemption for organised events, and the police have been not applying that. So basically we haven't got clarity on that from the courts because they copped out yesterday.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone who's spoken. I speak as Reading Trades Council from the RMT, and also RMT Disabled Members Advisory Committee, but I'm also a local Labour Party candidate. Firstly, from Reading Trades Council and all the unions in Reading Solidarity, we've got our own problems with fire and rehire. We've got a lot of problems going on with strikes. We've had one of our local strikes where managers have been driving their cars at the picket line. We've also got security guards in the Royal Berks Hospital who are currently striking for a pay rise that was actually approved a year ago and still hasn't been paid. Their conditions are terrible. They're being sent into COVID wards, told they're COVID. So as I say, solidarity from all of us down here, and we're watching what you're doing very carefully. We also have Reading buses, Reading buses who are going through a lot of trouble as well. Two very brief questions is how can trades councils...
James, I'm afraid your signal's really bad.
Cheers. Thanks very much, Karen Reisman from Unison Greater Manchester Mental Health Branch, and a health worker, the one who was fined £10,000 last Saturday. But I want to start by offering absolute solidarity to the bus workers at Queen's Road Garage. I have to say that the increased use of fire and rehire is an absolute disgrace. It just runs a coach and horses through all the things that we've negotiated over the years and the contracts we have, if they can just tear them up at will. And increasingly, there are employers that think that that's what they can do. And And I think the fact that people are fighting back on such a wide layer of fronts where that's happening is something that all of us need to support, because I think it's crucial for every one of us in this room and every working class member in Britain that we stop them getting away with fire and rehire. That's why my union branch have been so hard on offering solidarity to the bus workers. And I have to say, it's always nice to get that solidarity return. So it was fantastic to see the bus workers arrive in the square last Saturday in support of health workers who are fighting back against the 1%. And I think that it was quite shocking to me, having negotiated with the police for a period of time, and then they drew a line in the sand and said you can't do it, so we stopped, to then find myself getting a fine was quite shocking. And I do think, considering how safe that protest was, you know, we're health workers, we know how to do risk assessments, we know how to manage it. We had cones on the floor, we had stewarding, we had people sort of 2 meters apart in the outside. The idea that this was a risk to anybody is a joke, and it isn't about because we're at risk to anybody. It isn't about safety. They wouldn't have reopened schools on Monday with 10 million people, given that scientists are telling them another 30,000 people will die if they do. So it isn't about safety, these attacks on protests. It's about a government that are increasingly making working class people pay, and they don't want us to have a right to oppose that. And I think it's really, really important that we do stand up and fight that as well. I will be challenging my fine through the court system, and thank you to every single person who helped donate to the crowdfunding, which meant that very quickly I didn't have to personally worry about the £10,000, because we have raised more than that and enough to do some of that legal appeal. So I just wanted to say thank you to the bus drivers. It was amazing to see you walking through the square with your flags. I think you made a fantastic entrance, and I think that, you know, that the picket line is a fantastic picket line as well, in terms of the solidarity and the support that you have. And I think it's our job in the rest of the Labour movement to make sure that you win. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. And solidarity from everybody, I'm sure, for you know, fighting that absolutely outrageous fine.
Just very briefly, just to say that this is a fight for every worker, and we need to keep going and support the bus drivers as much as we can. And I think Kath made the point at the start about how in local government we need to be using our power there as much as we possibly can. So I know that Andy Burnham has met with Go North West, and there's a number of our local MPs who've written, like I have, to Go North West as well. But I think if your MP hasn't mentioned anything publicly, or even your local councillors, I'd suggest people to get in touch with them and just make sure that we're putting as much friendly pressure, if you like, on our local representatives to up the ante on this, because we expect any local authority procurement processes to protect workers right down their supply chains. And if we've got companies that are potentially going to be part of this bus franchising model that's going to be rolled out in the future, we need to use our power to make sure that it's done in a way that upholds this good employment charter. But that's all I wanted to say, really. Thanks, Ian, and solidarity.
Thanks, Rebecca. And it has been good to see a number of MPs coming down to the picket line and showing their support. And I'm sure we're all waiting with bated breath to see Andy Burnham joining the picket someday soon.
I don't think I've got anything else to add other than this. We're watching Manchester closely because, as other speakers have said, if Go get their own way in Manchester, they're going to try it on, and not just them, but other operators. You know, they all talk to each other, obviously. So, you know, it's important that they don't succeed in this hire and fire and rehire situation, because it's just going to spread further.
Yeah, thanks, Ian, and again, good luck and solidarity for your own dispute.
Yeah, I just want to say, I do believe when Go North West and Go Ahead Group, who were part of this, attacked Queen's Road, Manchester before, just some little bus garage in Manchester, that they could just throw whatever they wanted at them, and we just, you know, sit down, let it happen, and do nothing about it. Well, that's totally wrong. The massive amount of support we've had for all the MPs, all our comrades, and the fight from United itself, you know, we won't be going away. We won't be letting this happen. You know, we're fighting this for everyone. So again, thanks for all your support and all your solidarity.
Thanks, Dave. And I'd just add, for anybody locally who hasn't visited the picket line, it really is worth popping down. It is one of the most impressive picket lines I have ever seen. You know, very, very well organised and well equipped, and it's great to see people, you know, setting out to send a signal to the employer that they're going to be there as long as it takes, and they're making sure that they're comfortable and well fed, and they've got toilets and, you know, all the things to make sure the employer can see that determination to actually bring this to a successful conclusion. So it's only right the last words should go to Pat.
I just want to thank everybody for the support today. It's been amazing. And thanks for everybody that's come to the picket line. We've had some great people come to the picket line, not least of which the great Rebecca Bailey. The only disappointing thing's not been Andy Burnham's not turned up, but I'm sure there's time for him yet. But other than that, it's been amazing, and thanks to everybody. Solidarity. Well, thanks very much, Pat, and a huge solidarity to all the strikers from everybody here. And just a reminder that on the manchestertuc.org.uk page, there's a no-go page on there where there's lots of information about the strike and where you can send messages, and it's got the address of the picket line if you haven't been down there yet, and details of some of the bus operators that are being used to provide the strike breaking services. So please check that out, and well done for everybody for coming. It's been incredible turnout on a Saturday morning, and enjoy the rest of your day.